She was fleeing an arranged marriage. A poor mechanic hit her, not knowing she was a billionaire. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get started with today's story. Lina had always lived a life dictated by others. Born into an influential family, she was expected to adhere to the rules laid out by her parents and her society. Yet, inside, she was a free spirit. Every part of her life, her career, her choices, even her love life, had been planned for her. She was to marry a man she barely knew, a man chosen by her family. But Lina knew that if she went through with it, her life would be a prison. That's why, on the night of her wedding rehearsal, she made a decision. She would run. In the dead of night, Lina snuck out of the grand mansion her family owned in the suburbs of the city, her heart pounding in her chest. She barely had time to grab her essentials, just a small bag, her phone, and the sheer determination to leave everything behind. She didn't know where she was going, just that she couldn't stay. Her family's wealth, their expectations, the luxurious home, everything felt suffocating. She needed to be free. As Lina ran down the empty streets, she found herself in unfamiliar parts of town. She had no destination, no plan. The city felt so vast, so isolating, but she kept moving. It wasn't long before she stumbled upon a small, rundown auto repair shop on the outskirts. The garage was quiet, the only light coming from a flickering bulb in the corner. It looked like a safe place, a place where no one would find her. The door was slightly ajar, and without a second thought, Lina walked in. There, working late on an old pickup truck, was a mechanic, David. He was bent over the engine, his worn-out shirt stained with grease, his hands rough and calloused. He didn't notice her at first, too focused on the task at hand. But as Lina stepped further inside, the sound of her shoes scraping against the concrete floor caught his attention. He looked up, surprised. "Can I help you?" he asked, his voice gruff yet kind. Lina froze for a moment, uncertain of what to say. She could barely make eye contact. She was running, scared, and alone. I need help," she stammered. "Can you hide me? Just for a little while." David raised an eyebrow, studying her. There was something about her, something that felt out of place in this part of town. She was dressed in fine clothes, too refined for someone who would normally end up in a garage like this. "Are you sure you've come to the right place?" he asked, wiping his hands on a rag. "I'm just a mechanic." But there was something about the desperation in her eyes that softened his usual guard. He nodded slowly. "Okay, come in." David didn't ask questions. He could see she was scared, and for reasons he couldn't explain, he wanted to help her. It wasn't the first time someone had sought refuge in the garage, but this felt different. Lina hesitated but walked in, her heart still racing. David led her to a small room in the back, away from the shop, where she could rest. It wasn't much, just a dusty cot and a small window, but it was a sanctuary for now. She sat on the bed, still uncertain of what to do next. As David left, he reassured her, "I'll be back in the morning. Just get some rest. You're safe here." And for the first time in what felt like forever, Lina felt a little less alone. Little did David know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would change both of their lives forever. The next morning, Lina woke up to the smell of fresh coffee brewing in the small kitchen of David's garage. The sun had barely risen, casting a soft, golden light through the grimy window. The room was humble, with walls that seemed to sag under years of wear and tear. But for Lina, it felt like a refuge from the life she had been running from. She pulled herself out of bed, the remnants of her night's sleep heavy on her eyes. But there was a certain peace in the stillness of the morning. She could hear David moving around outside the room, his footsteps echoing softly as he worked. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel the constant pressure of someone watching her every move. She wasn't being told what to do or where to go. For the first time in a while, Lina felt like she could breathe. She took a deep breath, trying to push away the anxiety that had been building up for days. She had no idea what her next step would be, but one thing was clear. She couldn't go back to the life she had known. She wouldn't go back. As she walked out of the room, she was met by David, who was standing by the counter, holding a cup of coffee. His presence was steady and comforting, a stark contrast to the whirlwind that had been her life up until now. "Good morning," he said, offering her a cup. She hesitated for a moment before taking it, her fingers brushing his ever so slightly. "Thank you," she said softly, her voice still carrying the weight of the emotions she had been holding in. "No problem," he replied with a small smile. "You must be hungry." He gestured to a simple breakfast spread on the table: eggs, toast, and fresh fruit. It wasn't much, but it felt like more than enough in this moment. Lina sat down, her mind racing with thoughts of what to do next. As she ate, David chatted about his work. Nothing special, just the usual day-to-day tasks of fixing cars and running the garage. But there was something in the way he spoke that made Lina feel like maybe she wasn't so out of place here after all. He wasn't asking questions. He wasn't pressuring her. He was just there. She began to open up, telling him about her life before all of this. About the expectations of her family, the arranged marriage that she had been running from. David listened intently, his focus unwavering. He didn't interrupt, didn't ask her to elaborate or explain herself. He just listened. For Lina, that was a gift. It had been so long since anyone had really listened to her. She finished her breakfast, feeling a little lighter, like maybe, just maybe, things could be different. But the reality of her situation came crashing back when her phone buzzed. She quickly picked it up, her heart sinking when she saw the name on the screen, her father. She let the call go to voicemail, not ready to deal with the guilt, the pressure. "I have to go," she said quietly, almost to herself. David looked up from the car he was working on, wiping his hands with a rag. "You don't have to leave yet," he said gently. "You're welcome to stay as long as you need." Lina forced a small smile, grateful for his kindness, but she knew she couldn't stay forever. "I wish I could," she murmured. "But I don't know how much longer I can keep running." David didn't press her. He just nodded, the understanding in his eyes clear. For now, Lina was safe. But as she stepped outside, her phone buzzed again, the reality of her world waiting for her to return. As Lina stepped outside, the cold breeze hit her face, a stark reminder of the life she was desperately trying to escape. Her phone buzzed once again. This time, it was a text message from her father. "Where are you?" She stared at the words for a moment, feeling a heavy knot form in her stomach. The pressure was building, and she knew that it was only a matter of time before her family would come looking for her. She had been gone for almost 2 days now, and the weight of that reality hung over her like a dark cloud. David stood by the garage, wiping his hands on a rag, watching her as she stood there, the phone still in her hand. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the fear, the uncertainty. But he didn't say anything. He simply gave her the space she needed. "You don't have to go back," David said after a moment, his voice gentle but firm. "You can stay here as long as you need." His words were kind, but they only made the guilt heavier on Lina's heart. She had no idea how much longer she could hide. She couldn't live like this forever, running from everything she had ever known. Her family would find her. They always did. Lina took a deep breath, trying to shake off the wave of emotions that threatened to overwhelm her. "I can't stay here," she whispered, more to herself than to him. "I can't keep running." David looked at her with understanding. But he didn't push. He just nodded, acknowledging her struggle. "I get it," he said softly. "But I want you to know, you don't have to face this alone." For the first time since she had arrived, Lina allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. She hadn't realized just how much she had needed to hear those words. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't even know why I'm here. I don't know what I'm doing." David smiled, though it was small and kind. "You're here because you're trying to do what's right for you. That's enough." The sincerity in his words touched Lina in a way she hadn't expected. She had been so focused on escaping her family's expectations that she had forgotten what it felt like to be truly seen, to be understood without judgment. As the day wore on, Lina stayed in the garage with David, helping him with small tasks around the shop. For the first time in a long while, she found herself laughing, the sound strange but comforting in her own ears. She had forgotten what it was like to feel this free, this light. But as the sun began to set, reality hit again. Her phone buzzed once more, this time with a voicemail from her mother. The message was brief, but the desperation in her mother's voice was clear. "We know where you are. You need to come home." Lena's heart raced, and she immediately felt the urge to leave, to run again. But David was there, his presence grounding her in a way she hadn't expected. "What will you do?" David asked quietly, his gaze steady on her. Lina swallowed hard, her fingers trembling as she clenched her phone. For a moment, she considered her options. She could go back, give in to her family's demands, live a life she had never wanted. Or she could stay, take the risk of losing everything, but finally live for herself. She looked at David, who was waiting for her answer, not pushing, not judging. In that moment, she made a decision. "I'm not going back," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "I'm going to take control of my life, even if it means losing everything." David smiled, a look of admiration in his eyes. "Then I'm with you." And for the first time in a long time, Lina felt like she wasn't alone. She had found a new path, a new beginning, and the courage to walk it. No matter what the future held, the next few days were a blur for Lina. She stayed at David's garage, working side by side with him, learning about cars and the simple life he had built for himself. For the first time in a long time, she felt at peace, like she could breathe without the weight of expectations bearing down on her. But as the days passed, she knew she couldn't hide forever. Her family would be relentless, and soon, they would send someone to find her. David could see the tension building in her. It was in the way she hesitated whenever her phone buzzed, the way her eyes darted to the door whenever someone passed by. He understood her fears. He knew what it was like to feel trapped, to feel like there was no way out. But he also knew that Lina was stronger than she realized. One evening, after a long day of work, David sat across from her at the small table in the corner of the garage. He had been watching her, noticing the way she had been avoiding her phone calls, the way she seemed to be constantly on edge. "Lina," he said gently, his voice calm. "You can't keep running. I know you're scared, but you can't let fear control your life." Lina looked up at him, her eyes tired but determined. "I don't have a choice," she said quietly. "I can't go back to that life. I can't marry someone I don't love, and I can't live under my father's thumb any longer." David leaned forward, his expression serious. "I know it's not easy, but you're not alone in this. You've got a choice. You can stay here, with me. I'll help you." Lina's heart skipped a beat at his words. It was a simple offer, but it meant more than she could say. David had never asked her to explain herself. He had never pushed her to reveal her secrets. He had just been there, offering her a safe place to stay and a chance to rebuild. But even now, as she sat there, she knew she couldn't keep relying on him forever. She had to make a decision. "I don't want to be a burden," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't stay here forever, David." He shook his head, a soft smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You're not a burden. You're just someone who needs a fresh start. We all do." Lina's eyes filled with gratitude. It wasn't just the fact that David was offering her a place to stay, but the fact that he believed in her. He didn't see her as a rich girl running away from her responsibilities. He saw her as a person, someone who deserved a chance at happiness. That night, as Lina lay in the small room she had come to call home, she thought about what David had said. He was right. She did have a choice. And maybe, just maybe, she could take control of her life again. But there was still so much uncertainty. What would happen if her family found her? What would she do then? Lina's mind raced with questions, but one thought kept coming back to her. She couldn't live a lie anymore. She couldn't live a life that wasn't hers. And she certainly couldn't marry a man she didn't love. The next morning, as Lina sat at the small table, she felt a sense of resolve she hadn't felt in years. She had made up her mind. She wasn't going back. She was going to fight for her freedom. David walked in, as he always did, with a cup of coffee in hand. He set it down in front of her, his eyes searching hers for an answer. "What's your decision?" he asked softly. Lina met his gaze, her voice steady. "I'm not going back," she said. "I'm going to take control of my life, no matter the cost." David's eyes softened, and for a brief moment, he looked like he wanted to say something more. But instead, he just nodded, a look of quiet pride in his eyes. "Then we'll do this together." And for the first time in a long time, Lina felt like she was no longer alone. She had a choice, and she was ready to make it. The days that followed were filled with decisions. Lina and David worked together in the garage, fixing cars and maintaining the shop. It was a simple life, but for Lina, it was a welcome change from the chaos she had left behind. But, despite the peace she felt, the looming threat of her family's search was always on her mind. Every time her phone buzzed, she hesitated, her heart racing with fear. What if they had found her? What if it was too late? David could sense the tension in her. He had been giving her space, allowing her to find her footing, but he also knew that she couldn't keep running forever. One afternoon, after a long day of work, David sat down next to Lina on the porch of the garage, the evening air cool and calming. He had noticed the strain in her eyes, the way she flinched every time her phone went off. He had waited until now to speak up, but he knew it was time. "Lina," he said softly, "I know you're worried, but you can't keep running. You're not meant to live like this, hiding. You need to face your family, or you'll never be free." Lina looked at him, her heart sinking. "I can't go back, David. I can't face them. They'll never understand. They'll never let me go." David nodded, his face thoughtful. "I get it. I know it's not easy, but hiding forever isn't the answer either. You have to take control. If you want to live your life, you have to fight for it." His words hit her like a wake-up call. She had been so focused on escaping that she hadn't stopped to think about the bigger picture. Running from her problems wouldn't solve anything. But what was the alternative? How could she stand up to her family, the people who had controlled her every move for so long? David's voice brought her back to the present. "You don't have to do it alone. I'll help you, whatever you decide. But you need to choose your own path." Lina felt a wave of gratitude wash over her. She had never felt so supported, so understood. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she had someone in her corner. And that meant more than she could express. But the weight of her decision was still heavy. She had spent so long being told what to do, who to be, that the thought of making her own choices was terrifying. "I don't know if I'm strong enough," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. David placed a hand on her shoulder, a reassuring gesture that gave her strength. "You are stronger than you think. You've already made it this far. You just need to take the next step." Lina closed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words. The next step. That was what it all came down to. She had been living in fear, but now it was time to face it. The next morning, as the sun rose over the quiet town, Lina made her decision. She was done hiding. She was done being controlled. She wasn't going to let fear dictate her life anymore. She would confront her family, no matter what the consequences were. And with David by her side, she knew she wouldn't have to face it alone. She took a deep breath, feeling a sense of empowerment she had never known before. "I'm going to do it," she said, her voice filled with resolve. "I'm going to face them." David smiled, proud of her. "I'm with you, every step of the way." And for the first time, Lina felt truly free. Free to make her own choices, free to live the life she had always dreamed of. It wasn't going to be easy, but she was ready. And no matter what happened next, she knew that she had the strength to stand up for herself, to fight for the life she deserved. The day of reckoning had arrived. Lina had spent the last few days in a state of restless preparation, gathering the courage to face her family. David was there, as he had been every step of the way, supporting her, reassuring her. But deep down, she knew this was something she had to do alone. She couldn't rely on anyone else to make the decisions for her anymore. Her heart pounded as she stood at the edge of the driveway, looking at the road that led back to her family's mansion. The weight of her decision felt heavier than ever. She had spent so many years conforming to what her family expected of her, living a life that was never truly her own. Now, standing here, she realized how much she had lost in the process. She could feel her nerves starting to rise, but a deep breath steadied her. "You've got this," David said softly, stepping up beside her. His presence was a steady anchor. "Whatever happens, I'll be here. For you." His words were simple, but they were exactly what she needed to hear. She gave him a small smile, then turned her attention to the car that was parked just ahead. She had decided to confront her family on her terms. The drive to her family's mansion was long, and as the miles passed, Lina could feel the past weighing on her more and more. Her father's stern face, her mother's disapproving looks, the pressure of expectations. She had been running from all of it for days, but now it was time to face the reality. The mansion loomed in the distance as she neared the gates. Lina's hands gripped the steering wheel tighter. This was it. There was no turning back now. When she arrived, the mansion seemed as imposing as ever. The tall gates, the perfectly manicured lawns, it all screamed control, tradition, and everything she had been trying to escape. She parked the car in front of the grand entrance, taking one last deep breath before stepping out. Her family's home was filled with the memories of her childhood, luxury, but also a sense of suffocation. The moment she stepped through the front door, she was greeted with a cold silence. Her father was sitting in the grand study, his back turned to her, but he knew she was there. Lina, her father's voice was calm, but there was a sharpness to it that made her spine stiffen. We've been looking for you. You know you can't keep running forever. Lina stood tall, her heart pounding in her chest. I'm not running anymore, Father, she said, her voice firm. I've made my decision. Her father turned to face her, his expression a mixture of surprise and anger. And what decision would that be? He asked, his tone icy. Lina took a deep breath. This was it. She wasn't going to back down. I'm not going to marry him. I'm not going to live my life the way you want me to. I'm going to live for myself, and I'm done following your rules. The silence that followed felt suffocating. For a moment, her father didn't say anything. The weight of her words hung in the air, and Lina felt the strength of her conviction start to fill the space between them. Finally, her father spoke, his voice cold and hard. You are throwing away everything we've built. Do you know what you're doing? But Lina was no longer afraid of his threats. I know exactly what I'm doing, she replied. I'm choosing my own life, and that means I'm not going to follow the path you've set for me. It's my life, and I get to decide what happens next. Her father's eyes narrowed, but there was something else in his gaze now, a hint of realization. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by her. You'll regret this, he said, his voice low and dangerous. But Lina held her ground. Maybe I will. But I'd rather regret choosing my own path than regret never having the chance to try. With those final words, she turned and walked out of the study, her head held high. As she walked back to the car, her heart felt lighter than it had in days. She had done it. She had faced her fears, confronted her family, and chosen her own future. And for the first time, Lina felt a sense of freedom she had never known before. The confrontation with her father had left Lina drained, but it had also given her something she hadn't felt in a long time: power over her own life. The weight of her decision lingered in the air, but it wasn't as heavy as it had been before. She had spoken her truth, stood her ground, and now there was no turning back. David had been waiting for her in the car when she returned to the garage, and though he didn't say anything immediately, the concern in his eyes spoke volumes. He could tell she was shaken, but there was a quiet strength in her now. She had done what she thought she had never been capable of. You did it, David said softly as she got into the passenger seat, his voice filled with admiration. You didn't let him control you anymore. Lina nodded, but her voice was tight when she spoke. It didn't go as I imagined. I thought maybe he'd understand, or at least try to convince me otherwise, but instead, she trailed off, unsure how to finish the sentence. David looked at her, his expression unwavering. You can't change him, he said gently. You did what you had to do for yourself. That's all that matters. His words were like a balm to the rawness inside her, and she felt the pressure in her chest slowly ease. It was true. No matter how much she wanted her father to accept her choice, she couldn't control him. All she could control was how she responded. And she had responded by choosing her freedom. Over the next few days, Lina tried to focus on moving forward. There was still so much uncertainty ahead. Her family wasn't going to give up easily, and the possibility of them trying to bring her back was always on her mind. But there was also something else she had to face. What came next? She had walked away from everything she had ever known, and now she had to build something new, from the ground up. One evening, as she and David sat together on the porch, watching the sun set over the horizon, Lina voiced her concerns. What now? She asked quietly. I've made my choice, but what do I do next? I don't even know where to start. David smiled, that reassuring smile that had become a constant source of comfort. Start by living. Start by believing that you can make it on your own, because you can. You've already taken the hardest step. Lina looked at him, feeling a mixture of gratitude and uncertainty. She had come so far, but the future still felt unknown. David's words, however, gave her a sense of possibility. You're right, she said, her voice gaining strength. I've taken the hardest step, and I'm not going back. I don't know where this journey is going to take me, but I'm going to walk it. The next day, Lina started taking small steps toward rebuilding her life. She reached out to friends, ones who had long been disconnected from her because of her family's control, and slowly began to re-establish those relationships. She also looked into ways to support herself, finding work that allowed her to remain independent. It wasn't easy, and there were moments when the weight of her decision came crashing down on her again, but each time, she reminded herself why she made it in the first place, to live authentically. David continued to be her steady companion in this new chapter. As they worked together, fixing up old cars and running the garage, Lina found solace in the routine, the quiet moments of connection. It wasn't the luxurious life she had been born into, but it was real. It was hers. And that was all she needed. As the days turned into weeks, Lina began to realize something profound. She had the power to shape her future, not her past. And with that understanding came a newfound peace. Her family may never accept her choices, but she was finally at peace with herself. She had chosen the life she wanted, and that was all that mattered. As time passed, Lina settled into her new life. She had started to carve out a routine for herself, and while it was far from perfect, it was hers. She worked at the garage with David, gaining new skills and building a sense of independence she had never known. Every day, she grew stronger, more confident in her ability to create a life on her own terms. But despite the peace she was beginning to feel, there were still moments when her past crept up on her. There were nights when she lay awake, wondering if she had made the right choice, if her family was right, if she should have gone back. But those doubts didn't last long. She reminded herself of the strength it took to leave everything behind, to step into the unknown. She was choosing to live her life authentically, and that was something no one could take away from her. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. David had been acting a bit different for the past few days, quieter, more distant. Lina noticed, but didn't say anything. She thought maybe he was just tired from the long hours they'd been working. But then, on a bright Saturday morning, as they were taking a break from fixing an old truck, David turned to her. "Lina, there's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice serious. She looked up from the hood of the truck, wiping grease from her hands. "What is it?" she asked, sensing the shift in the air. David hesitated for a moment, his eyes searching hers. Then, as if making a decision, he took a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he said slowly. "About us." Lina's heart skipped a beat. She had always felt a connection to David, but the thought of it turning into something more had never crossed her mind. She had been so focused on rebuilding her life that the idea of love seemed like a distant memory. But now, standing in front of her, David seemed different, more vulnerable. "David, she started to speak but stopped when he held up a hand, signaling for her to wait. "I don't expect anything from you," he continued. "I just need you to know how I feel. You've changed my life, Lina. You've given me hope again. I care about you, more than I ever thought I would." His words hung in the air, and for a moment, Lina couldn't speak. She wasn't sure what to say, how to respond. She had never imagined that David, someone who had been so steady, so grounded in her life, could be feeling this way. She looked at him, searching for the right words, her heart racing. "David, I care about you too," she finally said, her voice soft but honest. She had known it for some time now, but hearing the words aloud felt like stepping into something new, something real. But even as she spoke, doubt crept in. Could she allow herself to love again? Could she trust herself to open up after everything she had been through? David seemed to read her hesitation and gave her a reassuring smile. "I'm not asking you to decide anything right now," he said gently. "I just needed you to know. And whatever happens, we'll figure it out together." His words brought a warmth to her chest, and for the first time in a long time, Lina felt something stir inside her that wasn't fear or uncertainty. It was hope. The weeks that followed were filled with the slow blossoming of a new kind of relationship between them. They worked side by side, laughed together, and shared quiet moments when words weren't necessary. Lina found herself thinking more and more about the future, about what it could look like with David by her side. But even as she allowed herself to feel these new emotions, she knew that her journey was far from over. She still had to fight for her independence, for her right to live on her own terms. But for the first time in a long time, Lina didn't feel like she was doing it alone. She had someone who believed in her, someone who cared for her. And that, she realized, was enough to start building something new, a future that was hers to define. Months passed, and with each day, Lina grew more confident in her new life. She had settled into a rhythm at the garage with David, her days filled with hard work and her evenings with quiet moments of connection. Her past, though still a shadow, had become easier to navigate. She had started to rebuild relationships with old friends and found a small place of her own to live. It wasn't much, but it was hers, just like everything else she was now creating. But as much as Lina had moved forward, there was one thing she couldn't escape. Her family had never stopped looking for her. The pressure of being hunted, of not knowing when they might show up at her door, lingered like a storm cloud. She hadn't heard from them in a while, but that didn't mean they had given up. One afternoon, as she was working on an old truck, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It was short, direct. "We know where you are. Come home." The message sent a jolt of panic through her, but she quickly steadied herself. She wasn't the same person she had been when she first ran. She had her own life now, one that she had built from nothing. And that meant something. David came over to her as she stared at the screen, his face filled with concern. "What is it?" he asked. Lina looked up, meeting his gaze, her heart heavy. "It's them. My family. They found me," she said, her voice quiet but firm. David's expression hardened, but he didn't speak. Instead, he pulled up a chair beside her, sitting down without hesitation. "What are you going to do?" he asked, his voice steady. Lina's mind raced, her emotions a whirl of uncertainty. For a brief moment, she considered going back, just to explain, to try to make them understand. But the thought quickly vanished. She had tried that before, and it had only ever led to more control, more manipulation. She had made a promise to herself. She wasn't going back. "I'm not going back," she said, her voice stronger now. "I've built my own life. I won't let them take that from me." David smiled, a look of pride in his eyes. "You've come a long way, Lina. I'm proud of you." His words filled her with warmth. For the first time, she realized that. No matter what happened, she had the strength to face it. And this time, she didn't have to do it alone. The next few days were filled with tension as Lina prepared herself for what was coming. She knew her family would push harder now, that they wouldn't stop until they had her back. But this time, she was ready. She had built a life for herself, one that was real and free from the chains of her past. And as much as she loved David, as much as she cherished the life they were creating together, she knew it was time to take that final step. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lina stood in front of the garage, looking out at the future she had created. She wasn't running anymore. She wasn't hiding. She was living. And that was enough. "I'm ready," she said quietly, more to herself than to David. He stood beside her, his hand resting on her shoulder. "I know you are," he said, his voice filled with quiet confidence. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." And as they stood there, side by side, Lina realized that no matter what came next, she had everything she needed to face it. She had her freedom. She had her choice. And she had love, something she had never thought she could have. With that, Lina knew that whatever her family's next move was, she would face it on her own terms. She had finally found her voice. She had finally found her home. In this captivating tale, we follow Lina, a woman running away from an arranged marriage to reclaim her freedom. Set against the backdrop of a small garage, she finds solace in the unexpected companionship of David, a mechanic who has his own struggles but offers her the chance to start over. As the story unfolds, Lina learns what it means to take control of her own life, facing her past and her family's expectations head-on. But as with all great millionaire stories, a twist awaits, pushing her to make difficult decisions about her future. With unwavering determination, Lina chooses to live life on her own terms, slowly building a life outside the shadow of her wealthy family. As David and Lina grow closer, their bond deepens, creating a powerful connection that challenges everything she once knew. Amidst the tension of facing her past, Lina realizes that she has everything she needs to move forward: love, courage, and freedom. This journey is a perfect example of the dramatic twists and turns that make millionaire stories so compelling, showing the power of choice and independence in the face of adversity. Will Lina be able to fully escape the control of her family, or will her past continue to haunt her? With the support of those who truly care for her, Lina is ready to take the next step toward her future. This is a must-watch for fans of millionaire stories, as it proves that the true value of life is not in wealth, but in the freedom to choose your path.